Good morning, everyone. Hope you're well. Welcome to this legal update webinar for the environmental and health and safety update given to you by the compliance people. So my name's Mick Baah. I'm one of the part of the consultancy team here at the compliance people. As you can see, there's my rap sheet. So you can obviously have a look at the bits and pieces that I've been up to in my time in doing health and safety. As a consultant for the compliance people, some of my job functions involve carrying out legal compliance audits, assisting clients with the initial setup of their legal registers with us, and also providing advice and guidance in obviously how allowing them to navigate through the health and safety issues or health, safety, environmental issues as such. My specialism, as you can see from the screen, is more in health and safety, but I have dipped my toe into the environmental waters, if you will. So I will that is something that I'm developing as time goes on. Also, as a member of the consultancy team, one of the things that I do get involved in supporting the team with is ensuring that obviously the platform is up to date with legislation summaries. So making sure that it's as accurate and as good as it can be for you guys on there. So I'll take you through the health and safety update for this webinar. My colleague Hannah Williams will take over halfway through the session, and she'll take you through the environmental update for you. Okay, so in terms of what we're going to go through from the health and safety viewpoint, these are some of the topic areas that we're going to cover. We'll have a look at updates to the coronavirus and COVID-19 and the impact on health and safety legislation. We'll have a look at the Employment Rights Act 1996. So in terms of detrimental health and safety cases and the amendment order there. So I'll have a look at the updates to that piece of legislation. We'll also have a look at the Fire Safety Act. So we'll have a brief run through in terms of its introduction last year. We'll also touch on the Building Safety Bill and the Building Safety Levy. Our old friend REACH will come back out, so we'll have a look at in terms of REACH and the latest updates that have impacted it in the last 12 months in terms of REACH. And we'll also have a look at some other legislation that's been updated with regards to chemicals. The final bit that we'll have a look at in terms of the health and safety update, we'll have a look at the things that are coming up on the horizon. So a couple of changes, or a couple of 14 changes that are coming up in the next 12 months or so with respect to the personal protective equipment amendment regulations, and also the changes that are going to be applied to COMAH potentially in the forthcoming months as well. So we'll touch on those. So first and foremost, we'll kick off at looking at an update on the coronavirus pandemic and obviously the impact on health and safety legislation with that. So a quick overview. So in the last couple of weeks in particular, there's been an easing of restrictions with regards COVID-19 and the coronavirus response. Obviously the Omicron variant obviously has been very prevalent in the last few months for us. But what impact has that had on health and safety and the response? In a nutshell, not very much really. The requirement is for the workplaces, organisations to carry on doing what they've been doing really. And these are some of the key things that you'll be expected to maintain, or if you've not really got on board with it, it's certainly to obviously enhance with regards to your response. So the first and foremost one is to review your risk assessments, carry on updating them, carry on maintaining them as you have. There's very much a strong impact and a strong recommendation for you to carry on reducing contact for workers, so that to lessen and minimise the risk of transmission of coronavirus in the workplace. We're also looking at in terms of putting an emphasis on adequate ventilation. So a number of organisations that I've visited, certainly in the last couple of years, have taken steps to adjust ventilation in terms of either mechanical systems or certainly concentrated on the ventilation within the workplace. So again, ensuring there's a strong emphasis on ensuring that you've got adequate ventilation in your workplaces. Carry on in terms of and keeping a close eye on your cleaning and hygiene measures within the workplace as well. So ensuring that those measures are in place, are enhanced, and obviously on top or as strong as they can be, and obviously minimising the risk as well. Even though guidance in the last, certainly in the last few weeks, months, has kind of lent towards home workers and the relaxing of that, not much of a big push for people to work at home, or certainly an easing of that restriction. Remember, that's just the minimum standard what the government, and it's only guidance what they're saying. If, for example, you know, you can work above that, but still, if you've got a potential of your workforce working at home, ensure that you've got protection measures in place for those, both from obviously a physical as much as you can do, but also certainly a mental viewpoint as well. So make sure that they stay on your radar. And just to point out, which I'm sure all of you are very much aware of, that guidance for coronavirus, certainly in the workplace, is different for all jurisdictions. So just be aware, obviously, that you are referring to the right ones in terms of the measures that you put in place. In terms of coronavirus legislation, what we have on LUS is we've included all the regulations in particular which apply directly to workplaces, employers. So keep an eye out for any new entries that obviously come into your registers or already sat within your existing register profiles. And also we'll ensure that we've got summaries on there that affect individuals in particular relating to domestic travel as well. So please keep an eye on your profiles. If you've got any queries or questions, obviously you know where to find us. Just get in touch. Okay, moving on to the next topic. We're going to look at the Employment Rights Act 1996. So last year there was an update to this in terms of protection from detriment in health and safety cases, Amendment Order 2021. So what was this all about? So this came into force towards the back end of May last year. And what it's looking to do in terms of what this part, though this summary or this legislation is trying to do, is basically protect all employees from harm in the workplace, from any reasonable action that's carried out with regards to health and safety. Now, this has been extended to include Limb B workers, or workers, if you will. So Limb B workers are those who could be classed as like dependent contractors. So in particular, if they are maybe self-employed within your, maybe self-employed contractors, but are basically carrying out work or service on behalf of your organisation. So pretty much on the books, doing work for the company as such. So this is basically ensuring that no harm comes to those employees or workers as a result of that. So potentially what we class as a reasonable action would be someone, for example, who maybe puts himself as up for election as a safety representative or representative of employee safety, reports an unsafe act or unsafe condition, or performs duties as a safety rep, or again, representative of employee safety for the business. So it gives them protection from that harm. And when we're talking about harm, we're looking at, for example, unfair dismissal or unfair treatment as a result of doing that particular reasonable action. So this is where this legislation comes in. So we're looking to obviously now, like I said, it's been extended to protect those additional workers as a result of that. Okay. Next area we're going to look at is the Fire Safety Act. So obviously there's been a lot of change within certainly the last couple of years in terms of fire safety and building reform. Building reform we'll touch on very, very shortly, but also massive changes as a result of the fallout from the Grenfell Grenfell fire a few years ago. So what we're looking at in terms of the Fire Safety Act, this was born from the Fire Safety Bill and became law in April last year. Main features of this, or some of the main features of the Fire Safety Act, is what it does. It makes amendments to the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order 2005. It's looking to obviously try and strengthen that position of the Fire Safety Act and strengthen the position of the Fire Safety Order, should I say, apologies, in terms of putting more responsibilities on people who are classed as responsible. It mostly applies to multi-occupier residential buildings, if you will. So that's where obviously the focus is looking at. So ensuring that the measures and requirements of the Fire Safety Order are applied to these particular premises. As I mentioned previously, or touched on, there's duties on responsible persons. So in terms of those, not just in limited to carrying out risk assessment, but to make safe, for example, make safe and compliant areas which are communal, and also ensure that areas of the building such as structure and external walls are catered for, which might extend to windows, balconies, doors, for example. So that's what it's kind of looking at in terms of ensuring that the responsible persons have got those on the radar. It provides additional clarity for duty holders. So there are almost like definitive lines drawn, people who are named and people who are classed as responsible or accountable will be named as such, so people know exactly what they are responsible for, and provides easier paths in terms of enforcement action as well. So it makes it easy for the fire and rescue service, for example, to enforce against non-compliance. It is yet to obviously be fully released into force, even though obviously in terms of ensuring that those parts of the Fire Safety Order do come into force and obviously move. We expect that to come into play certainly in the next 12 months or so. So please keep an eye out for that. But obviously they're the main aspects at the moment of the Fire Safety Act. So keep an eye on certainly your loss profiles and summaries in terms of further updates for this one. Very much in tandem in terms of the reform of fire safety legislation and building safety, we've got the Building Safety Bill and Building Safety Levy that we'll talk about next. So the requirements of the Building Safety Bill, what we're looking at here, there's the intention to kind of overhaul like building safety legislation and obviously how that kind of comes into play. So the Building Safety Bill introduced into Parliament at the end of June last year, and there's a requirement for it, or there's a focus to kind of ensure that there is much more greater joined up thinking with regard to commission participation in design and construction of building work. So parties, organisations, individuals who are involved in these particular aspects of building work is that they are very much on the same page and very much aware of their responsibilities and where the lines are drawn. There's a requirement for health and safety to be considered right from the outset and throughout a building project. So not just at different stages where obviously the need comes in. It should be there from right from the outset of the project and right throughout to completion. A huge focus on the Building Safety Bill is to ensure that residents feel completely safe and also they are safe throughout. So massively affected by the project, that the focus is in ensuring that they feel completely safe and throughout. The Building Safety Bill will, at the moment, there seems to be an absence in terms of accountability if non-compliance occurs. So people, it's difficult and obviously at the moment to try and obviously and find out where accountability lies as such. What the Building Safety Bill is designed to do is obviously eradicate that, so that clear lines are drawn. And obviously, if non-compliance does occur, there is a clear line to obviously where that obviously sits. Hot on the heels of that, it will kind of strengthen the enforcement angle for the building safety bill to be, or building safety punishments or contraventions to be obviously picked out and accounted for. So that was one of the key things, that, again, to highlight responsibilities for people in the building project and also know what they're accountable for. There is a plan to ensure that secondary legislation in terms of building safety regulations, draft regulations, are going to run alongside the bill. So this is going to be, again, you're going to see the bill introduced at different stages throughout the next 12 months in that respect. So once again, keep an eye out for updates to your summaries. And as we've touched on in terms of how the Fire Safety Act has amended the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order, the Building Safety Bill, again, will strengthen the position of that particular piece of legislation as well. Obviously, very much working in tandem alongside fire safety. So once again, there will be amendments to ensure that obviously responsibilities and duties are followed. So there will be further amendments made by the Building Safety Bill to the Fire Safety Order. The Building Safety Levy, which is applicable in England. So this was consulted on in July 2021. What it's looking at is looking for the Secretary of State will have the power to impose the levy. What the levy is going to be highlighted to developers. So the levy is going to be imposed on developers. So any buildings that are at least 80 metres in height, or of at least 7 stories, unless they're subject to an exemption, will be potentially pulled into the levy. What the levy is, the aim of the levy is to do is to ensure that the cost of remediating any historical building or historical buildings which are classed as unsafe or are unsafe, those costs can certainly be contributed towards. So again, in terms of removal any unsafe cladding that exists. The requirements for the levy to include is part of the building safety regulations. So obviously that secondary legislation, building safety legislation that will come out. We'll talk more about obviously how the levy is going to be applied and when. So again, that's something to again look out for in any potential summaries and updates that are forthcoming. Okay, what we'll talk about now is our old friend Reach, and also after we've mentioned Reach, we'll do a quick update on any changes to the chemical legislation that might be affecting the organisations that we work with. So Reach, a very quick recap. So Reach was copied into UK law with respect to Brexit happening on the 1st of July 2021. So in terms of the 1st of January 2021, apologies. So the original EU version and then a new UK version was evolved and obviously came into force. The HSE refers to the UK Reach, but something just to point out, but UK Reach only applies in Great Britain. In terms of compliance with Reach, so UK Reach if you're based in Great Britain, and EU Reach if you're based in Northern Ireland or in the EU. So that is which version of Reach will apply to your business. Manufacturers, importers, distributors, so you're going to be affected by Reach if, for example, you make or import chemicals into Great Britain under UK Reach for any particular substance, whether it's hazardous or non-hazardous. if it's at a quantity of 1 tonne or more per annum. There are exemptions, multiple exemptions, and these include food, medicines, cosmetics, some minerals and low-risk natural occurring materials. And as obviously you can see from the screen, they're the type of things, just to name a few, that are exempted. So there are exemptions. So if you are obviously dealing with those particular areas, just ensure that obviously you know where you stand in that respect. So in terms of importing, so previously importing meant if you were importing from outside the EU into the EU. Now, obviously, that's been further reduced into now if you're importing it into Great Britain. So you'll be classed as an importer. So, for example, if you had a sister site previously, for example, in the EU, when you're importing into Great Britain, you will be classed as an importer. If you are buying from a UK-based supplier, though, okay, you will not be importing. So that's not classed as an import. So just ensuring that you're aware of that particular definition as such. Registration requirements. So there's a registration requirement on manufacturers and importers in GB, and in that respect, you're required under UK REACH to register your chemicals with the HSE if you're looking at over 1 tonne per annum for that. One of the important important features of UK REACH is downstream user and import notification, so or classed as DUIN. So if in the last couple of years, so in the 2 years prior to the 1st of January 2021, you were classed as a downstream user or distributor under EU REACH, you're required to obviously fill out a downstream user import notification. The deadline for this was 27th of October 2021, which represents 300 days after the implementation day of the 1st of January 2021. Defer registration obligation. So what it actually does is that it allows organisations the time to register relevant substances under UK REACH. So the defer period will vary very much further from dependent on your substance, tonnage, the tonnage that you're looking at, or the hazard property that your hazard profile of the substance. So the registration varies from 2, 4, or 6 years. And the new registrations after the deferred period must be made to the HSE. So it's very much dependent with respect to, obviously, like I mentioned, your tonnage band of the substance and also the hazard profile. If you've not registered, or if you missed the deadline of the 27th of October last year for doing that, the HSE or the UK government have allowed more time for you to do that. So my advice for you would be to have a look at arranging that to be done ASAP, because the UK have granted more extension time for DUINs to be submitted to them. So please, it would be a good thing to have a look into that ASAP if you have missed that deadline at the moment. Some other updates in terms of GB retained regulation on REACH. So a few amendments that have come into force. So we've got the REACH Amendment Regulations 2021. So what these do is provide minor amendments and references and definitions. Also provides in terms of definitive reference to the term medical devices. This is only referred to in UK REACH, and also clarifies the powers of the UK REACH in terms of the competent authority, so the HSE, obviously being that particular body. So the REACH Amendment Regulations, that's what they do. So some amendments obviously just to be aware of in that respect. Now, a bit of an update in terms of other chemical legislation that again might be affected some of the organisations that we work with. So there are some new substances that have been added to the restricted lists. So we've got perfluorocarboxylic acids and also NN-dimethyl formamide has also been added to the restricted list. So that's something to be aware of. So if you're using those or you're aware of your use of those particular substances in your operations, please just bear that in mind. With regard to CLP, there's been changes to the Annex 6 with regards some additions to the requirements for that. So again, please be aware of that. I won't obviously I won't go through the whole of the changes in that respect, but again, that's just drawing attention to. So there have been changes to Annex 6. There's also been, in regards biocides regulations, there have been additions to the approved active substances and also the authorised products list as well. Once again, I won't go through all the additions, but again, there's been changes to the active substances and authorised product list for that as well. So some of these changes, again, will apply to both the EU and GB versions. But again, for further information, please have a look at your entries, relative entries on for that. Okay, so some of the changes just to go through in terms of product safety and compliance. So the introduction of the product safety metrology amendment regulations towards the back end of last year brought about some changes with respect to where UKCA marking and CE marking sits. So just some highlights, some changes on there. So there's some new rules obviously were brought out for UKCA marking and also CE marking with regards to conformity assessment and marking in that respect. This particular legislation is relevant to manufacturers, importers, and distributors. So if you place any CE mark goods on the GB market. So the changes which are brought about initially came out through guidance, but now obviously have been cemented in law. So the UKCA conformity mark will replace the CE mark from the 1st of January 2023. The deadline has been extended as a result of the COVID pandemic. So hence that's why it's been pushed out just over a further 12 months at the moment. And just to reiterate, the UKCA mark goods will not be recognised in the EU market. So obviously we've got a bit of time, obviously, if you are one of those organisations who obviously this pertains to in terms of ensuring and CE mark goods and UKCA marking goods are where they need to be. With regards to that, there's no changes in regard to the Northern Ireland aspect. CE marking will continue as normal in Northern Ireland, and the UKNI mark has been introduced. So this is not equivalent to CE marking and UKCA marking in terms of the UKNI mark. It will be put on goods if, for example, the conformity assessment has been carried out by an approved UK approved body in Northern Ireland. Then you're allowed to put the UKNI mark in there. But the change from the product or the product and safety metrology regulations has no effect on the UKNI mark. Okay, some final bits and pieces I just want to finish with in terms of on the horizon. So we've got coming up in the next few months, we've got amendments to the personal protective equipment at work regulations in 2022. So this is due to come in force in April this year. Similarly to the employment rights amendment from last year, it's going to extend the scope of the regulations, not to cover employees, but also to cover workers as well, LIMB workers. So from a viewpoint of this legislation, LIMB workers were very much considered as the same as employees. There's also potential changes to the COMAH Regulations 2015. At the moment, it's predicted it's going to be minor administrative changes. The reason for the change is due to the dissolution of the Public Health England body as such in the last few months. There was a consultation that was carried out or finished at the end of August. And the next stage of this is that the recommendations from that consultation are going to be made to the Secretary of State. So again, watch this space, and I'd keep an eye on your entries in terms of any changes when that kicks in. Okay, that concludes the health and safety update, and I'll pass on to my esteemed colleague, Hannah Williams, who will take you through the environmental update for you.
Thank you, Mick. Welcome, everyone. As Mick mentioned, my name is Hannah Williams. I'll just bring up my lovely mugshot there, doing my apprentice style pose, I think, with that one. You can see on the slide what I get up to day by day. I'm obviously a consultant for the compliance people. I help businesses pretty much the same as Mick, up and down the country, with everything to do with environmental and health and safety, legal compliance, working with management systems, aspects registers, doing lots of training courses. So hopefully I've got a few of my lovely clients on the webinar today. I know a few of you signed up, recognise some of your names. So great to have you here, and welcome to everyone that I've not worked with before. So obviously the environmental section of this legal webinar update, I'm going to be taking you through some changes that have happened. We've obviously got the Environment Act 2021, a big change there within the environmental field. So we'll have a look at that, as well as the plastic packaging tax. So that is another big change for us in the environmental landscape. We'll have a look at a few bits and bobs that have changed in energy and climate change legislation. And then, just as Mick's done, I'll have a look at what might be coming up for us in the near future. So no better place to start then than the Environment Act 2021. If you work within the environment field, I'm sure you have already noticed that this act is now finally been published. We've been waiting a very long time for it. It actually first came into Parliament as a bill all the way back in January 2020, so even before COVID-19 was a thing, really. It's taken a very long time to pass into law, mainly because of the pandemic. There's been lots of delays, but it finally came into force it's on the 9th of November 2021. So the Act applies across the UK. Parts of the Act apply in only certain jurisdictions, but the Act as a whole does apply across the whole of the UK. And what it does is provide a new legal framework for environmental governance in the UK. And it brings in measures for the improvement of the environment in 4 priority areas. So the first area is air quality. So there's measures in the Act around having to have a national air quality strategy every 5 years. It gives local authorities the ability to fine for the emission of smoke in smoke control areas in England, and it allows products to be recalled that might not meet environmental standards. The second topic area is around nature and biodiversity. So this very much focuses on the kind of planning, permission and building side of things. There's measures being brought in for things like biodiversity plans and a focus on the term biodiversity net gain for nationally significant infrastructure projects, a scheme around biodiversity credits and local nature recovery strategies. So very much kind of focused on planning when it comes to the improvements that the Act is looking to do around nature and biodiversity. The third topic area is around water. So the Act allows the creation of regulations for water resource management plans, drought plans. It puts requirements on sewerage undertakers to make sewerage management plans, drainage plans, and requirement on the Environment Agency and sewerage undertakers as well to reduce storm overflows and their impacts. So very much kind of measures being introduced for water companies basically and regulators. And then the final topic area is around waste and resource efficiency. So the Act has brought the ability in for regulations to be made around some more producer responsibility schemes. regs around deposit schemes, and the introduction of an electronic waste tracking system, something that we've been waiting a very long time for. It seems to have been around as an idea for a number of years now. I know I've had many clients when I've been looking through all their waste transfer notes asking me when I think an electronic system might be used, but there's measures in the Act that talk about it, so it could be on the horizon, who knows. This part of the Act in the waste and resource and efficiency area does also strengthen restrictions around hazardous waste in England and Wales, and further prohibits and restricts waste imports and exports, and puts requirements on collectors of waste around the segregation of recyclables for industrial and commercial waste. The really important thing to know at the moment for a lot of you listening is, unless you are a regulator, you don't currently have any compliance duties under this Act. It doesn't make any immediate changes that we need to be aware of if you aren't a regulator. There's lots of things for regulators and the government to do, and there's lots of measures in the Act that allow regulations to be created, so further legislation that would be supplementary to this Act around all of the things that I've just explained. So the government under the Act has to do lots of things around environmental targets, including setting and hopefully meeting them. The government has to have an environmental improvement plan. So there is currently one of these. It's called Green Future, our 25-year plan. That is effectively the environmental improvement plan that the Environment Act talks about. You may have noticed that it did come out back in 2018, and it was quite big news at the time. I think only Northern Ireland doesn't currently have an environmental improvement plan, so the government there is going to have to put one together. So as I mentioned earlier, changes to duties and for kind of standard businesses are very much expected in future legislation made under this Act. We don't currently have any changes to flag up to you now, unless you are a regulator. The Environment Act also brings in the Office for Environmental Protection. So this is a completely new body. And obviously when we were part of the EU, it was the EU that held the UK government accountable on environmental issues. So this Office for Environmental Protection are going to take that over. They've got a job on their hands, haven't they? Good luck with that. They are going to have to hold the government accountable on their environmental improvement plan. This Office for Environmental Protection covers England at the moment. Northern Ireland are thinking about whether it's going to apply there as well. They do have a dedicated website where you can learn a bit more about them if you want to take a look at that, and just pop it into Google, it'll come up pretty simply. So that's the Environment Act. I've flagged up the kind of main things that it's doing at the moment, but yeah, the main thing to take away is there's not actually anything you need to do if you aren't a regulator at the moment, but we will expect lots of changes in the near future, which you'll obviously be kept up to date on through your environmental legal register. Moving on to the plastic packaging tax then for 2022. This is a new tax that's coming in. It's going to probably affect quite a lot of you listening. If you are bringing things into the country that have packaging around them. The actual tax itself was brought in by the Finance Act 2021. So the Act there, the Finance Act 21, brought the ability for the plastic packaging tax to come into force. So that is the entry that you will find in your environmental legal register, the Finance Act 21, the information around the plastic packaging tax at the moment. It's in the waste chapter, so you can go and take a look at that after this webinar if you've not already read through it. And there will be some further regulations. There's things that I'm going to be touching on in the On the Horizon chapter of the webinar that I'll flag your attention up to as well. But this is basically a new tax that applies in the UK. It's for plastic packaging from the 1st of April 2022. So if you manufacture plastic packaging in the UK or import plastic packaging into the UK, then you are going to have compliance duties under this new tax. So when I say import plastic packaging, I mean whether you are importing just unfilled packaging, so reams of plastic packaging for whatever reason your supplier is not in the UK and you actually import that for your use, or whether you're actually importing plastic packaging around products. So an example would be a plastic bottle that's filled with drinks if you're importing that type of product, or just a product within a plastic bag that's in a cardboard box. That plastic bag would fall under the scope of the plastic packaging in terms of import. So if we're doing any of those things, manufacturing plastic packaging in the UK or importing plastic packaging into the UK, then this definitely is something you need to look at in more detail. The tax is being brought in to encourage the use of more recycled plastic within the manufacturing of plastic packaging. And that is because we only have to pay the tax on our plastic packaging if it has a recycled content of less than 30%. It is important to note that you still actually have some requirements if your plastic packaging has a recycled content of more than 30%. I will touch on those in the next slide. Also important to note that I could do a full hour's webinar on the plastic packaging tax. Obviously, I'm just very much summarising the main messages here. I could talk about this for quite a long time, so I'm going to be taking you through the main messages, but this may be something you need to go and look at into more detail. So who does the tax, what types of packaging does the tax apply to? The regulations use the term plastic packaging components. That's a term that they like to band around a lot, but it basically means packaging that's used in the supply chain. So this means packaging to contain, protect, handle, present, deliver goods, or packaging that's for single use by the consumer, such as plastic bags, bin liners, those types of things. So it's really, really key to familiarise yourself with what is in or out of scope of the tax in order to understand if it applies to you. There's a whole host of government guidance around this. There's pages and pages of it. There is a decent page actually that's around what's in and out of scope, and having a read through that can hopefully make it a bit simpler for you. There's exemptions that I need to point out to you. The things around packaging of licensed medicine is exempt, as well as some types of transport packaging to import multiple goods. So if we've got plastic packaging around multiple goods, i.e. the kind of shrink wrap that would protect that, then it doesn't fall under scope. But if you were shrink wrapping boxes that contained, plastic bags in there with goods in, then the plastic bag within there would be in scope. So it's not that simple, hence why I'm sort of really pointing out to you that you do need to go and read that in quite a lot of detail. The rate of tax to pay is £200 per tonne. I will touch on how you pay that on the next slide. But the main questions to kind of ask yourself at this point is, are we manufacturing packaging with a recycled content of less than 30%? Are we importing any packaging, either around goods or not around goods, with recycled content less than 30%? Do go and have a look further if you think this is going to apply to you. So just some more things to point out about the tax. There's requirements around registration. If we've manufactured or imported 10 or more tonnes of finished plastic packaging within the last 12 months, then you do need to register. You will be able to register from the 1st of April 2022, according to the government website. So we can't go and register at the moment. The government website is currently saying that you can do that from the 1st of April 2022. And this 10-tonne threshold includes all plastic packaging, regardless of the recycled content. So if you're manufacturing plastic packaging or imported it, regardless whether it's recycled content, you still need to register. There's also record keeping requirements for everyone. Anyone that manufactures or imports plastic packaging has to keep records, even if you aren't going to have to pay the tax, i.e. your packaging has a recycled content of over 30%. And this is basically to prove you're exempt. A few of you will be familiar of me checking through your documents and records in a sort of compliance audit setting. If we haven't got records to evidence that we're actually exempt from this tax, then it becomes really quite difficult to prove that. So that's quite key to point out there to you. And the way that we pay the tax is done via a tax return to HMRC every quarter. And then you have to pay that bill by the last day of the following month. So it's the payment is very much done through kind of tax returns, HMRC. So that's how that will work. Again, I must just flag up to you the whole fleet of guidance that the government has brought out around this. It's obviously a very new area. There's still regulations to be published around it, but as far as we are aware, it's definitely going to apply from the 1st of April 2022. So take a look further, go on to the entry on loss. We've made links to all the guidance straight there from you, so you don't have to search through Google. If you look at the entry for the plastic packaging tax at the moment, which is in the Finance Act 2021. So leaving that there, then we'll move on to a little look at some energy and climate changes. There's a piece of law that has come out called the Occupational Pension Schemes, Climate Change, Governance and Reporting Regulations 21. These are applicable in Great Britain, and then there's also some similar regulations in Northern Ireland of the exact same name. And these basically apply to trustees of larger occupational pension schemes from the 1st of October 21. So law, the Pensions Act 2004 requires that occupational pension schemes are set up as trusts. This means just basically that your assets in the pension scheme are separate from those of the employer. So any trustees now have a requirement to have knowledge and understanding of the climate-related risks and opportunities that affect those occupational pension schemes. So if you are a trustee of an occupational pension scheme, then you basically, the new requirement is to have knowledge and understanding of climate-related risks. You may have noticed these regulations enter your legal register on LUS. So they're applicable if you either yourself or you know there's someone within the business that is a trustee that you need to make them aware of these requirements. It's the pensions regulator that would monitor compliance and provides guidance, so it's very much done through that type of regulator rather than anybody to do with from an environmental perspective. So kind of trying to bring the forefront of climate change and climate risk money related kind of things with that. So do go in and read the summary within your legal register if that's something that you think might apply to you. Staying with energy and climate change, we've got the Green Gas Support Scheme Regulations 2021. So these apply to energy suppliers and producers in Great Britain. We've got a new scheme coming. It came in from the 30th of November 2021, and the regulations were published. And it supports the anaerobic digestion industry to basically make lots of green gas, which is you do that through the production of biomethane, and inject that green gas into the grid so that we can use it. It's going to be funded by the Green Gas Levy. So companies are basically going to be paid to support to produce this green gas and make it, and that payment to those energy suppliers is funded via the Green Gas Levy. This is a levy that all licensed gas suppliers in Great Britain will have to pay. The first payment is required in the first quarter of 2022-23. So from April onwards this year, sorry. And like with any levy that comes, it's always billed that it will be passed on to bill payers. So with everything that's going on with the news around energy bills and energy prices, it may be sort of difficult listening for some of you basically that there's a new levy coming around. The reason it's being brought in is for the need to decarbonise our heat generation within Great Britain. So heating industry and businesses and homes is responsible for a third of UK's greenhouse gas emissions. So a lot of greenhouse gas emissions comes through heating our homes and our facilities that we work within. So this scheme is very much trying to replace our natural gas that we use that creates lots of greenhouse gas emissions with green gas in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, obviously. So it makes payments to producers of biomethane quite similar to if you installed like a biomass boiler through the renewable heat incentive, which is now closed to applicants, by the way. It still exists, but you can't actually apply to it anymore, the renewable heat incentive. So it's a kind of replacement for that, if you will, or something that's going to work alongside it. Producers would have to meet sustainability criteria in order to receive the payments, but that if you aren't an energy supplier, then you potentially should look out for perhaps a further increase in bills potentially as this green gas levy comes into play from the 1st of April onwards. Staying with energy and climate change, we've got the Ecodesign for energy related products and energy information regs 2021. So if we make or import into Great Britain what's known as energy related products, so they're things like fridges, dishwashers, washing machines, dryers, hoovers, everything that Mick gets out when he gets home from work and starts cleaning the house with. These are products that have very specific design requirements, and these regulations basically set them. So if we make or import those types of products, these regulations are definitely applicable to you. There's things around how efficient they have to be, as well as providing repair information to customers, and there's requirements around energy labelling as well. You might notice that any of those types of products for quite a while now have had energy labels. They've changed how they work and how they're rated quite recently, so there's all those requirements there as well. We've got some little changes in Scotland to tell you about. We've got the Low Emission Zones Scotland Regs 2021. So these basically allow for low emission zones to be introduced in cities in Scotland. Responsibility very much of local authorities. We're looking at Glasgow, Edinburgh, Aberdeen and Dundee at the moment. So the ability for low emission zones to be created has been put into law, so they may be coming in the future. You'll notice that they're popping up kind of all over the place these now. There's one coming in Greater Manchester if anyone's operates around those areas. We've obviously got the one in London that's been around for a long time. And then also staying with Scotland, we have got the UK withdrawal from the European Union Continuity Act 2021. This came into force at the start of last year, kind of January, February 2021. It doesn't create any duties for organisations, but it basically creates a new body in Scotland called Environmental Standards Scotland, which their main purpose is to monitor and ensure compliance by public authorities in Scotland with environmental law. As a result of Brexit, we're obviously not being governed by the EU anymore from an environmental performance perspective. So Environmental Standards Scotland will do that up there. It requires the Scottish Government to create an environmental policy strategy and implements environmental principles into Scottish law that were previously enforced at an EU level. So no changes for kind of standard businesses. It's more a kind of government applicability there with that one. A few bits in the Republic of Ireland, just to draw your attention to. We've got the single-use plastics ban there now. This was brought into law during 2021. So we're all very familiar now with the kind of ban on certain single-use plastic products. We've got the equivalent regulations in England, Scotland, Wales, etc. Cotton buds, straws, etc. are not allowed to be sold, and that has now been put into law into the Republic of Ireland. They were just slightly behind there in the UK with putting that into law. And then we've also got something affecting the energy performance of buildings. So new and existing buildings have to have self-regulating temperature devices, i.e. like a thermostat, in each room due to the change being made by these regulations. And there's also lots of requirements put in around electric car charging points in car parks of new buildings and those undergoing major renovation. So I thought it was quite interesting. It was something that is happening at a Republic Ireland perspective, but we may start to see that through to the UK if that's something that they're doing over there. Just wanted to draw your attention to the COVID-19 regulatory position statement. So obviously Mick has touched very much on COVID from a health and safety perspective, but from an environmental perspective, we had a whole fleet of regulatory position statements published by regulators across the different jurisdictions. They first came out at the start of the pandemic. A number have now been withdrawn. They were things that basically said, don't worry about this. If you can't do your emissions monitoring right now, we're not going to prosecute you or give you a non-compliance or anything like that. But a lot of these have now gone. They were extended and changed and amended and etc. But quite a lot have gone. We do still have a couple in play. We've got the RPS C8, and this is applicable in England. It's the RPS that basically allowed us to not have to sign our wage transfer notes due to social distancing, etc. It took away the legal requirement for people to have to actually sign wage transfer notes and hazardous waste consignment notes as well. So this RPS is expiring at the end of March this year. I don't expect it to be extended given the government stance currently on COVID-19. So you will have to continue signing or start re-signing your wage transfer notes and consignment notes now. You can't not sign them. So just to point that out to you for that one. So looking at what's coming up in the future then on the horizon for environmental law, plastic packaging tax. I mentioned when I was going through the plastic packaging stuff just earlier that we are expecting further regulations. We have some draft regulations that you can see on the slide there. They haven't been published yet. You won't see them in LUS because they're not currently law. They're still in draft with the government, so they haven't actually gone into the statutory book yet, but they are expected and will come into force from the 1st of April. There's a consultation running on biodiversity net gain regulations. So I did mention biodiversity net gain with the changes with the Environment Act. So that is something that they're looking at putting in as an amendment to the Town and Country Planning Act. So if you're in the field of kind of planning and construction, you should certainly take a look at those. And the third thing I just need to draw your attention to is climate change agreements. A number of you on the call may have a climate change agreement with the environmental regulator in your jurisdiction. They are due to, the scheme started in 2013 and the targets are running to the end of 2022. So they're due to finish there, and there is currently a consultation running until the 11th of March on a future scheme. So if you're part of a climate change agreement, you very much might want to go and take a look at what they're consulting on. They basically want your opinions and thoughts on what the future schemes should look like. Obviously, it's quite a big financial incentive to be part of the climate change agreements, and a lot of clients that I work with do have one. So do take a look at that, and we expect kind of legislation changes to happen in order to either bring a new scheme in or extend the scheme as it is. So fab, that was a little whistle-stop tour through obviously the environmental section. Mick kindly took you through the update to health and safety. So those are your main summaries, main changes over the last 12 months that have happened in the field of environmental and health and safety law. So very much thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. I do hope you found it useful. Please.